I just have to ask this question. How many of you grew up in a religious tradition where it would not be appropriate 2 Sundays before Christmas to sing a pagan drinking song? Now, I want to ask you another question, and there is not a right or wrong answer to this. This will just help me. I have no idea whether you ever think about God or struggle with the issue of God, whether or not there is any such reality as God, or what is the nature of God. That's what I mean by struggling, thinking about these things. How many of you, would you say, in this last year have thought about or struggled with God? Just show me so I'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, so we'll think about that a little bit. Here's where I think this struggling with the divine has come in for me, and perhaps with some of you. I sometimes wonder if there really is any such reality as God. How many of you have ever asked that question? The practical implication of that question for me is, are we ultimately alone? Or is there some sort of presence with us? And so for me, that is an important, fundamental question. Have you ever wondered where your ultimate source is? In other words, have you ever wondered, where did I really come from, beyond your mother? Does anybody ask that? Where did you come from? And the other question that's related, where are we going? What's our ultimate destiny other than the grave or the crematorium? Is there something beyond this life? And for me, very much related to that question, in other words, if there is a destiny beyond this life, is there a reality that we have traditionally called God that holds us accountable for this life? Some of us believe that when we're dead, we're dead. Others of us believe that that's not the case at all, that we go on. But there is that nagging question about accountability. And some of us grew up in the Christian and Jewish tradition where it was framed in terms of judgment. I don't like judgment. Those hot fires by the campfire kind of got me away from hell, But is there nonetheless some sort of accountability? Whether we call it karma or judgment or accountability, is there something? These are the kinds of deeper questions that I periodically ask, and often I ask those in times of crisis. When somebody I love is sick or at death, at important times. But Christmas, for most people in this culture, always brings me, at least, around to looking at the question. I may look at it some years for, 5 seconds, and other years I may look at it for hours. But the Christian story makes a unique claim. And it's so powerful that I think that we've lost a sense of it. The unique Christian claim is that the great Lord God Almighty, however kind of terms you want to use, but that ultimate reality actually came to earth in the form of a baby, born to a woman named Mary. And the great Lord God Almighty humbled himself in the language of the church to take on the limitations of human form and live among us to show us the way to live. That's a powerful claim. Every Christmas, I struggle with this because there are two general ways that we can look at the story. One way we can look at the story is that it is the story of Jesus, a unique person. Whether that person was just human or human and divine, it's the story of Jesus. And so we sit here and we listen to the story, we look at the story, and the story of incarnation, that God is in the body of Jesus. It's his story. That used to work for me. For most of my life, that was my understanding. And if that is your understanding, that's fine. But the other way of looking at it that came to me later in life was to see that that story is not just the story of Jesus. That the story that is recorded in the Gospels is my story. It is the affirmation that God is in me. And that God is in you. And that every person who lives is that incarnation of the divine. That, like the claim for Jesus, it is the claim for us, that each of us is fully human, fully divine. And so when we begin to look at the story that way, it shifts. And it allows us not to ignore the story of divinity, but to actually give meaning to the divinity in our lives, how we treat ourselves, how we understand our relationship with God, and how we understand our relationship with one another, if we are all divine. And it is that lifelong journey of living out our divinity. Let me tell you just a little bit more about the story, though, because way back in the early church, see, I think, here's my guess. My guess is that when Jesus lived, and I'm going to assume for a moment that there was a historical Jesus. That's my personal bias. I think there was a historical Jesus. But I think that he was a reformer of Judaism. And that he was a very charismatic, powerful leader and teacher. But I have serious doubts that any of his friends or followers thought that he was divine when he was alive. They may have. But I kind of doubt it. But I think that what happened after his death and the reported resurrection, and the resurrection may have occurred, but that's another issue. I can't go there right now. But there was surely a sense in that early church that many of those early followers, after his death, believed that he was divine. I won't get too detailed about this, but there were two general views. One was that Jesus was eternally divine, that he was divine the same way as the Father. That is, that Jesus had always been, that there was never a time when Jesus did not exist, that he coexisted with the Father, and he was divine in exactly the same way as God the Father. The other view, which was held by fewer people, was that Jesus was divine, but not divine in the same way as the Father. That God had actually created Jesus. So Jesus wasn't eternal, but Jesus was created by God, and God actually used Jesus for the creation of the world. Makes no sense to us, but these were the two arguments. Jesus was eternally divine. The other, he was divine, but not divine in the same way.